Carol Beaumont.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Well, I'm almost at a loss for words, but before people get too excited, I did say almost. I have heard so much absolute drivel in the last couple of contributions to this House, factually incorrect and absolutely attributing views to this side of the House that bear no resemblance to reality. So let's start by saying that comments like this party is anti-business is wrong, is completely wrong. And in fact, sitting behind me is the Honourable Leanne Dalzell, who did more to do regulatory reform probably than any minister for quite some time. So if we are anti-business, I don't know why she bothered to do that. But anyway, I want to stand up and say that this is another bill that is unjustified, unnecessary, unbalanced and unfair. And somebody earlier from that side of the House did talk about the fact that these two bills go together, and on that point I quite agree. They do. Underlying them is the same sort of principles about backward looking, about taking away rights from people, and about actually removing the opportunity to move forward in our workplaces. And contrary to what Heather Roy says, actually the quality of workplace relations and building workplace productivity is something that this side of the House actually cares about very much. Our view, though, is that this should be built on workers' rights, it should be built on high trust, it should be built on lifting wages, not reducing them, improving conditions, not reducing them, and it should be with collective voice so that people can actually genuinely have a say at work and contribute. And some of the better employers in this country, not the mates of ACT, but some of the better employers in this country will tell you that actually having a highly engaged workforce, having a vehicle where their concerns and views can be put on the table and worked jointly through with the employer is actually how you can lift workplace performance. So I just want to put those things on the table because I've heard a lot of rubbish from the other side about our perspective that is just untrue. Now, I want to talk about what this bill, what this Holidays Amendment Bill means for both the quality of working life and the quality of lifestyle. Because basically this bill undermines the chance of having work-life balance, undermines improving the quality not only of working life but life outside of work. But before I get into that, let me just also reinforce the points of the regulatory impact statement, because I thought it was quite telling that Trevor Mallard's whole speech was able to be built around all of the negative things that are in the regulatory impact statement. It is absolutely extraordinary that we are dealing with a bill that is flawed from one end to the other, and even the Department of Labour, the government's agency dealing with this bill, has put that clearly in the regulatory impact statement. It actually says the analysis of the policy options under consideration is constrained by the limited availability of objective evidence of problems with the current holidays legislation, both on the type and extent of any problems. There is a lack of robust data available to quantify the potential impacts of the policy options considered. Now, I know that probably doesn't matter actually to some across the House because, why let the facts stand in the way of making changes? But it actually is pretty important if your own government department that deals with this is telling you things like that, then I would have thought that generally it would be worth thinking about. So there are three areas that I'm going to particularly focus on, three areas that I think will have an impact, a negative impact on work-life balance for the New Zealand workforce and on our families. The first of those is a backward and cynical policy shift. It actually is backward-looking and it's a cynical shift because it's happening at a time where people are under a lot of financial pressure. Wages are barely moving. In fact, in some cases, household incomes are going back. Costs are rising, high unemployment, and we're saying that giving people the opportunity to sell their statutory minimum holidays, not the extra that they're carrying forward that Heather Roy was talking about, but their statutory minimum, selling that in that environment is a free choice. Actually, I think what it is a misguided policy at a time when what we really need is to see wages shifting. We have got a low-wage economy. We are 30% behind Australia, and that gap is getting wider under this national government, getting wider under this government. So this is a proxy for shifting wages. Now, leave has absolute value for individuals and the community. That cannot just be compensated for by money. Why stop at 1 week? If this choice about selling holidays is such a good free choice and it all should be up to the individual, why don't we say actually all 4 weeks could be sold? Because that could be an individual choice as well. But the reality is we say that leave has some value, and it has value for rest and recreation for the worker, but it has wider community value. It has value for families. And one of the things in my previous role is I did a lot of work on the issue of work-life balance. We actually had a lot of research done. We had we looked at various research around the world, and we looked at what mattered to people. Very interesting piece of research done by a woman called Barbara Pocock in Australia, where she talked to a lot of teenagers. And she was trying to find out what they valued and what they wanted more of. And it wasn't money. It wasn't the latest technological device. Do you know what it was? It was time with their parents. That was the thing that they wanted more of, time with their parents. And like New Zealand, people were working very long hours. In fact, New Zealand has one of the longest working hours cultures in the OECD. That's probably been impacted on a bit by the recession, less overtime. By a lot, and I can get you those figures. But anyway, going back to the point about families, we will all know in this room people who, when they reflect on their working life, they don't go, gee, I wish I could have worked more hours. I've now reached retirement age, gee, I wish I could have worked more hours. But a lot of them will reflect on the fact that they wished that they had spent more time with their family. So this issue of holidays does actually have real implications for family time as well as the rest and recreation of the worker concerned. Also, this so-called option will inevitably be forced onto low-income workers and the most vulnerable workers, and will in some cases be used as a proxy or an alternative for a real wage increase. So here's a way you can get a 2% wage increase: just sell a week's holiday. Now, I just have to conclude the comments on the 4th week by saying there's been a lot of rhetoric over there about it's a choice and you don't have to do it and all of those things. Well, actually, it is an example of the unbalanced bit that I mentioned at the start, because ultimately, actually, it's up to the employer. The employer can have an absolute policy that says no holidays will be sold in this workplace, full stop. So, so much for the great choice, the two parties, they'll sit down together, they'll work it out. No, actually, the employer can absolutely determine that matter. So that's the point on holidays. I have to say the second thing is the most mean-spirited part of this bill, in my opinion, and unnecessary, and that's the changes around alternative holidays, or in fact widely known as time in lieu. This is the time that a worker gets when they work on a public holiday that would normally be a working day for them. The changes in this bill are so mean-spirited it actually defies logic, really. It certainly defies logic. So now, if the agreement can't be reached, the worker gets to determine when they will have their time in lieu. Because after all, they've worked on a day of great significance. They've worked on Christmas Day maybe, they've worked on Good Friday, they've worked on one of the public holidays when lots of their family and friends are having time off. Often employers need people to be working on those days. They work on it, they're entitled to a day in lieu. Currently, if agreement can't be reached, they get to choose. So they get to choose another day that might have some value or significance for them. The balance in this regard has also changed. So now, if the agreement can't be reached, who will get to make the decision about when the day in lieu is? Well, no surprise, it'll be the employer. So we had a very, very good submission made by an individual. Dennis Hickey, his name is, and he is a bus driver for Howick and Easton in Auckland. And he talked about this passionately. He absolutely understands that as a bus driver, he needs to work on public holidays because people need to be able to catch the bus. He absolutely accepts that's part of his job and he does it in good spirit. But he says, if I work Christmas Day, why on earth, if we can't reach agreement, should